Welcome, everybody. And we have with us Joan Ranquet, the founder, owner, and chief visionary officer of Communication with All Life University. Welcome, Joan.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And tell our audience about the work you do, what you're passionate about, and how you got involved in doing what you're doing.
Okay, well, first and foremost, I'm an animal communicator and author, and there's a few of my books that are out, and I've got more coming out. Um, and facilitate energy healing with animals, and I teach animal communication, and I take people on wildlife trips. And so I'm super passionate about all of it. And I help with animals in finding forever homes in shelters. So we work a lot with animals who aren't getting adopted through some of the healing techniques that we use. So I've been doing animal communication for about 30 years, but I believe we're all animal communicators. And if I'm honest, I was doing it since I was little, and we all have been. So one of the main things I do is I teach animal communication, and I teach energy healing, and I teach it from a very basic approach, and that it stays basic all the way to the advanced. Which I think anything good, if you're playing the piano and you're playing a, big concerto, you still started with the scales, right? Like that's the way anything great really goes, is you start with that. So it's a matter of really getting, so to do animal communication, it's a very simple matter of getting quiet, getting neutral, which is, I think, something that you might like, that idea. In being neutral, I'm able to hear or get a sense from animals what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, what they're seeing, what they're sensing. And so, when I first started doing it, it was the sort of thing where it was kind of troubleshooting in people's homes, and that's where, what most of my graduates will be out there doing is helping people who maybe have a cat that meows a lot while you're trying to interview, or a dog that might be leash aggressive but is otherwise super sweet. So all the little challenges that people have with their animals, those are the sorts of things that I love to help with.
And you've also said that, well, yeah, I'll ask this now. You've also said that you believe that animal communication can bring world peace.
I totally believe that animal communication could bring world peace. And the reason is, so when we think about what animal communication is, it's listening, right? It's using telepathy, sending and receiving information, and that would be in the form of pictures, words, and feelings. But at that point, it's so simple, right? It's a simple concept. It's not some convoluted story where there's a betrayal and then there's a hero and there's this or that, right? It's just simply, I'm feeling this. I'm not feeling safe. I'm not feeling loved. I'm sad, right? Those are the sorts of things that inform behavior. So if I were to sit and listen to a bunch of animals and help a bunch of animals, and I started thinking, wow, this is so profound. Just listening to them often is the healing piece, right? That what if I tried that with other humans?
People. Sure.
And so some of the energy healing techniques that we use is something called EFT, emotional freedom technique. And when the way that I set this up for my students to go out and do it in the world is I give them kind of an investigation script where they ask questions of the human, and through their animal communication, they're able to fill out the form to figure out what's going on with the animal. So in that process, though, my students have become deep listeners of the human. And when we listen, that's when possibility happens. That's when we're totally in an infinite possibility. That's when, especially if we're neutral, we can't help but to not judge. We have to be present. And in that space is complete peace.
And yeah, it's peace for us, but it's also peace for the people who are being heard.
It's absolutely like they're dropping their, they could be dropping years, they could be dropping pounds just by having a space where they're heard, where they're not judged, where they're able to be seen, be understood. It's really important.
So if like somebody was going to go out and be like, okay, why is my cat crying? Like when I'm wondering why my cat's crying when I'm about to start an interview, I call my ex who understands her words. She says she wants to play. And but what's something like, I mean, you're talking about stillness and telepathy and images, and what's like if somebody were, living with an animal and wants to do the most basic, you can try this at home, attempt at listening. What would you have somebody start with?
I would have them starting with like both feet on the ground. So I would have them just like kind of ground themselves for a moment and just breathe deeply. Try to get to a neutral space and then move your awareness over to your animal and start with getting just a sense of their essence or their favorite things that they like to do, like your cat likes to play right before an interview. And that kind of gives you a little sense of who your kitty is. And through that, just again, now your cat's being seen and heard and understood for a moment. And just keep practicing that and go deeper and deeper and deeper. I mean, once you open up to communication, then it's just, it's like the scales over and over again make a big concerto. But it starts out the scales. It starts out super simple.
And tell me about the wildlife tours. How do those fit into the difference you're trying to make?
Well, so, I always think of like the foundation is the animal communication and the energy healing. And the school in particular is the little rock. And then there's two areas that I play in that are kind of bigger game for me and bigger arena, if you will, and a bigger where because this is so solid, I can go out into these two areas. So the one area is the shelter work, and I'm happy to talk about that in a moment. And the other is the wildlife. So, when the two things that could, you always think about what are the things that would keep you up at night and are the things that drive you and are the things that become your passion or were your passion and then you're driven into doing something about it. I can't do anything about poaching. I can't do anything about the wildlife-human conflict. I can't do anything about the fact that endangered species could be gone in the next 5 to 10 years unless somebody does something. I don't have the know-it-all to be able to figure that out. I'm a white woman over here, so I can't come in with my arrogance about how they should do it. But what I can do is I can get people to also fall in love with animals, with wildlife and endangered species by taking them on these trips, by going and having these experiences and coming back with big, solid stories. And the other thing that happens is that we engage with communities that share their experience of how they became guides versus poachers, or how their community developed a fear about elephants and then overcame it. And when I start to understand and listen to what their experience is, I can come back and share that. And the more that we have compassion for the people on the ground and the level of poverty, then we're helping the animals. So I'm taking people on these trips, getting them to come back as kind of ambassadors for the situation by telling stories about the communities and the animals and falling in love with both the people and the animals over there. And then, like one of the trips, so we always have a donation engaged, engaging with the animals. But now we're starting to really look at how can we help the community. So one of the places that we're going in the fall is called Tula Tula, and that's in South Africa. And so while we're giving a big donation to Tula Tula for the elephants, we're also, because we were just there, a couple of us were just there and we're going back, we're going to work on a fundraiser to help the community get a well. Because the more that their life gets easier, then they can take in education and they can engage more with the elephant organization. And you know what I mean? It just goes hand in hand. But if you're always in fight or flight because you don't even have water, you can't even conceptualize that elephants are big, but they're not scary.
Well, back in the 90s, I saw a button. People used to wear buttons. It was about abortion, and it said, eliminate the need, not the opportunity, or the need, not the option.
Right.
If you're eliminating the need behind poaching, that's so much more effective than
absolutely
than any kind of punitive or restrictive approach.
Right.
And I'm also hearing just very basic conflict resolution principles of get the perspective and the need of both sides. Like from here, we're very aware of the needs of the elephants, although some people are empathetic and some people are not. And what are the needs of the communities? And also inside of those needs, how do some people choose not to be poachers? Right? How do they address that from inside their context?
And the biggest way is having food and water and light at night so they can do their homework and continuing to get educated, because I think everybody on the planet is born innocent, and to do something like that, whether there's a right or wrong, they're doing it out of desperation because somebody's offering them more money. But if people were educated or there was just a different structure, which they can create on their own, I don't need to make that up, then they can do things differently. And it literally comes down to their basic needs being met.
Yeah, well, that's a very powerful project.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to back up. You were saying that you use EFT in the animal communication. Now, EFT, obviously, it's like this hands-on thing. Do you do hands-on on the animals, or is there another way that you connect with them?
So there's a million ways. Number one, I love to do it on an animal. So if, let's say, you called me about your cat, I would walk you through how to do it on your cat. If your cat didn't like it, then we would air tap, or you could surrogate tap on a stuffed animal, or you could tap on yourself. So there's tapping on, and I don't have to be the one doing it. And I literally would be like, okay, inside of the eye, and you'd be on your kitty. I like to play. Outside of the eye, I like to play. Under the eye, but I'm bugging her. You know what I mean? Like, so we would play like that. So, so I do it. I move through it with people, or I come in and do it myself if I live in the same town as someone.
And tell us about the animals who are not getting adopted. How do you? I mean, I have a guess what you do. Like you clear with their blocks in some way, and then they attract people to adopt them. But
tell
us how it goes.
Okay, so clearing the blocks through EFT and animal communication, right? Because again, here's the thing. Humans, we have that caveman brain where we love stories, and we we believe that there's like a boogeyman still, you know? And so then when we see an animal kind of sad in the corner, we think somebody did something terrible to it. And the truth is, often many of those animals are just grieving, and not just grieving, they are grieving. They are grieving deeply because they have no concept of how they ended up there in this shelter, which triggers their fight or flight because it never gets quiet, or it's not safe, and they're not snuggled. It's not like they have 10 dogs all snuggled together in a pack. They're in these separate
It's not like
situations.
the cats have places they can run around. Yeah, it's they lose their family and then they're imprisoned.
Exactly. That's it. They lose their family and then they're in prison. And so your reactivity and you're coming from a sad and grieving place, and then that charming, vivacious cat can't be seen, or that really funny little dog that wants to help everybody can't be seen. And so when we start to use the animal communication, the EFT, and get the support of the staff, we can really start to see it all the way through to adoption with some of these animals that maybe have sat there for 2 years. And I mean, it's been extraordinary. We've been working with a group in Michigan, and I've gone there once. We're going again this next summer, and we've had extraordinary results. And then we have a class in the school, and a very advanced class. I don't let beginners get in there because it can be life or death for some of these animals. And so every week, different shelter or sanctuary or organization communicates. We, like 6 or 7 students, communicate in a class, and all those animals get adopted. So we have a weekly thing, and then we have a big thing where we go to the shelter and tap on 1 million dogs and watch them all get adopted.
Wow.
And we're going to start to open that up to more shelters.
It's actually much simpler than I thought it was. Just like they're all grieving, and so they can't show their personality. Like I thought they might have more complex blocks, like I don't know what, but
grief is, I mean, think about how much we avoid it, right? We avoid it at all costs, but they don't know to avoid it, right? So they just go, oops, there's my friend who's definitely, anyway, she got her place. So they really, they don't know how to fake it. I mean, they can fake some things. Certainly animals are adaptable and will do anything, when they're kind of auditioning for us. But then it goes back to that grief. And then what happens is, if there's been a grief or a sadness, and they're afraid they're not fitting in, their behavior is maybe not what the person expected. And the next thing you know, they get returned. And so a majority of these animals get returned over and over and over again. So really looking at the core grief and taking that out, and the core sadness and the core, sometimes there's anger, but it's really just either grief or, grief from the loss, or just sadness. It's really simple. And we're like that too. We have a bunch of stuff we add in with stories, but we aren't that different. We really just want safety and love.
Yeah.
Food is good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just very straightforward. They all have a shared trauma, right? I read, about 20 years ago, I read an article about trauma resolution in elephants who had been in circuses mostly. And well, I don't even know if I should share, but most elephants who get taken to circuses, a lot of them, their family members, often their mothers, are killed in front of them. And then they're, taken to often another continent, trained.
Yeah.
And elephants are at least as social as humans, right?
They're better than we are.
Yeah. And if they get angry, they could kill someone. And so elephants who have injured someone get taken out of circuses. And basically, all they need is to live with other elephants and not have to do anything, right? They just safety and choice.
Yeah.
Um, and and even though maybe these cats and dogs and rabbits, you can't offer them safety and choice in the shelter, you can let them know that they're basically safe and it can work out for them.
Well, what you can do is start to take the layers of trauma out. So then they do start feeling safe, like within themselves. And then they can make different choices when they're in a new home.
Mm-hmm. Very great. Very clear.
Yeah. So they do eventually get to that safety and choice if they're seen, if they're heard, and they have the opportunity to release and express it.
Nice. So I think we're getting toward the end. So there's I wanted to ask two questions. One is, you're very clear on your purpose that, connecting with animals is something that you've always gravitated toward, and you're seeing more and more ways to use your talents and leverage your talents to make a difference for animals throughout the world. What can you tell people who are like, I know I have a purpose, but I don't know what it is yet. I know I'm supposed to make a difference, but I'm not sure exactly how. Yeah, how do you help?
Every Sunday I call it my little church. I get on the couch, and especially as it gets colder, there's bigger cup of coffee and more blankets. And Sunday morning, I love to just sit with my journal. And I've done this, I don't know, my whole, adult life. And I've got my dogs and cats piled up, and I can see my horses in the distance. And I just sit and write. I look at life like right now, and I kind of live in the gratitude. And then I expand it out a year, sometimes 5 years, sometimes 10 years, just depending on my mood. If I want to sit and write for a really long time, then I'll do all of it. And if I'm like, I want to watch a movie or I should go ride, then I make it shorter. But the thing is that I I I think someone would start with maybe expressing on paper or even, in a device, like, what are the things I love, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I love animals and I love to help animals. It turns out this is something I didn't know about myself until I got deep in my work. I love helping anywhere I can, as long as it's I'm not needing to get something from it. Like I have a very healthy boundary around it, but I really know, like for example, when we're in the airplane and they say, "Would you take that seat sitting next to that door?" It's like I'd rather open the door and help people out than stand in line. You know what I mean? Like it turns out I'm a helper. So sometimes when you're journaling like that, you find out more about who you are. And as you find out more about who you are, a path gets carved. So, and, adding in the things you love and the things you're grateful for. And this is really important. You can love, like I love to ski, but I'm not going to go out and do it. Like I haven't done it in a really long time. What do I love that makes me feel good that I know I could do and makes me feel good? Because you know what? When I'm in a space of love and joy and creating, everyone around me elevates because this is so impactful. So the more if we each found those things that we love, that bring us joy, that fulfill us, right there, we'd have world peace.
Thank you. And then the last question is, tell everybody about your free gift.
My free gift is I have the Communication with All Life University Animal Communication Meditation. And so the meditation is really geared for you to just move into being you, getting quiet, getting neutral, letting go of the mental, physical, and emotional things that are going on with you, getting to an even more neutral space, and then being able to communicate with animals.
Um, I think that's probably close to the end of our time. So glad to have spent time with you, Joan.
Thank you so much. It really, I love that. Yeah, I love that to be included as an animal person in your mission.